I've kept a secret from my daughter for over 30 years. While she's always known me as someone who lives paycheck to paycheck, the truth is, I earn $50,000 every single month. When she invited me to meet her husband's wealthy family at an elegant dinner party, I made a decision that would change everything. I would walk into that room dressed like a woman who could barely afford rent. I wanted to see with my own eyes how they would treat someone they believed had nothing. What unfolded that evening shattered their world in ways they never saw coming. And honestly, they had it coming. But first, let me take you back to the beginning. Let me tell you about the woman my daughter thinks I am versus who I really am. My daughter Rebecca is 32 years old now, and she's never known the full truth about her mother. In her eyes, I've always been just an ordinary working woman, someone who catches the early bus to the office, returns home bone-tired every evening, wears clothes until they're practically threadbare, just another face in the crowd, probably pushing papers somewhere. Nothing worth bragging about to her new wealthy friends. And you know what? I never bothered to correct that impression. The reality? I pull in $50,000 every month as the CEO of a major consulting firm. I've held this position for nearly 15 years. I negotiate contracts worth millions of dollars. I make decisions that affect thousands of people's livelihoods. My signature on a document can change the direction of entire companies. But why would I tell her any of this? I was raised to believe that real power doesn't need a microphone, that true wealth whispers rather than shouts. So I kept my success private, locked away like a treasure nobody needed to see. My house is the same one I bought 25 years ago in a working-class neighborhood. My car is a 12-year-old sedan with a dent in the passenger door that I've never bothered to fix. I buy my clothes at discount chains, and I've been using the same winter coat for 8 years. I cook at home almost every night, clip coupons, and live well below my means. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. I've invested every extra dollar wisely, watched my wealth grow quietly in the background, and lived my life without needing anyone's applause. Because here's what I learned a long time ago. People who truly have power don't need to prove it. They simply observe. And believe me, I've been observing very closely. That's why when Rebecca called me last Thursday, I picked up on something immediately. Her voice had that particular tension in it, that nervous edge she gets when something's bothering her. It reminded me of when she was 16 and had to tell me she'd crashed my car. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something. Daniel's parents are flying in from the East Coast this weekend. It's the first time they're visiting us here. They've asked to meet you. We're hosting a dinner party at their rental house on Saturday evening. I really need you to be there, okay?" The way she said it set off alarm bells in my head. This wasn't a daughter excitedly wanting to introduce her mother to her new family. This was a daughter who was anxious, worried about how things would look, concerned about making the right impression. "Have you told them anything about me?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral and calm. The pause that followed told me everything I needed to know. Then came her answer, rushed and apologetic. "I mentioned that you work in an office downtown, that you've been on your own for a while, that you live a quiet, simple life, that you're not really, well off or anything like that." And there it was, the word that cut deeper than she probably intended. Simple. As if my entire life, everything I'd accomplished, everything I built, could be summed up in that one reductive, apologetic word. As if I were something embarrassing she needed to explain away before I even walked through the door. I took my time before responding, letting the moment breathe. "All right, sweetheart, I'll be there." After I hung up, I stood in my living room and really looked around. The furniture I'd owned for years, comfortable but clearly aged, walls decorated with discount store frames and family photos, a television from 2015, bookshelves from a yard sale. Nothing here screamed success or wealth. Everything said ordinary, modest, unremarkable. And right then, standing in that room, I made my decision. If Rebecca had already painted a picture of me as a struggling woman barely scraping by, if Daniel's family was preparing to meet someone they could look down on, then I would give them exactly that image. I would show up looking every bit the part of a mother who was drowning financially. I wanted to feel it firsthand, to experience exactly how they would treat someone they believed had nothing. I wanted to see who these people really were when they thought nobody important was watching. Because I had a strong suspicion about Daniel's family. I suspected they were the kind of people who measured a person's value by the zeros in their bank account, and my instincts have never once steered me wrong. Saturday arrived. I dressed in the worst outfit I could find. A faded floral dress from a thrift store, wrinkled and shapeless, scuffed floss shoes with worn soles, no jewelry except a cheap watch that had stopped working years ago. I grabbed a frayed cloth shopping bag, pulled my graying hair into a messy bun, and looked in the mirror. I looked like a woman defeated by life. Invisible. Perfect. I took a bus to the address Rebecca had given me, a gated community in the wealthiest part of town, where each home was a mansion, where the lawns were manicured like golf courses. As the bus rattled through those pristine streets, I felt something unexpected, a mixture of excitement and sorrow. Excitement because I knew something significant was about to unfold. Sorrow because part of me still hoped I was wrong. I hoped they would be kind, that they would look past shabby clothing, that they would treat me with basic human decency. But the other part, the part that had survived 30 years in cutthroat boardroom conversations, knew exactly what awaited me. The bus stopped at the community entrance. I walked through the gates, past the security guard who looked at me with barely concealed disdain, as if I didn't belong. I walked down the wide, tree-lined streets until I reached the address, a massive 3-story colonial with white columns, a circular driveway with a fountain, luxury cars parked in front. I took a deep breath, walked up the stone steps, and rang the doorbell. Rebecca answered. She wore an elegant navy dress with pearls, high heels, her hair professionally styled. She looked polished, expensive, nervous. When she saw me, her face changed. Her eyes widened, her smile froze. "Mom, you came." "Of course, sweetheart. You invited me." She looked me up and down, and I could see the embarrassment in her eyes. "Come in," she said quickly, stepping aside. I entered a grand foyer with marble floors, a crystal chandelier, a sweeping staircase. Everything screamed wealth. Daniel appeared from a side room wearing a tailored gray suit, looking like he'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. He was handsome, confident, and when he saw me, his expression shifted to something between surprise and discomfort. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, extending his hand. "Welcome." His handshake was brief, weak, dismissive. "Thank you for having me," I replied in a small, timid voice. Rebecca led me through the house to a formal dining room, and there they sat, Daniel's parents positioned at the head of an enormous mahogany table, like royalty awaiting subjects. Daniel's mother, Catherine, wore a designer burgundy dress covered in jewels. Diamonds at her throat, wrists, ears, fingers. Her silver hair was swept into an elaborate updo. She had that cold, calculated beauty that intimidates on purpose. Beside her sat Gregory, Daniel's father, in an impeccable navy suit with gold cufflinks and a watch that probably cost more than most people's cars. Both looked like they had stepped out of a wealth management magazine. I walked towards them with small, hesitant steps, like someone unaccustomed to such grandeur. Daniel made the introduction awkwardly. "Mother, father, this is Rebecca's mother, Mrs. Patterson." Catherine looked up slowly, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. I saw it all in that one look, the judgment, the disappointment, the barely concealed contempt. Her gaze lingered on my wrinkled dress, my worn shoes, my cheap bag. She didn't smile. She simply extended her hand, limp and cold. "How do you do?" Gregory did the same. A weak handshake, a forced smile. "Pleasure." I sat in the chair at the far end of the table, the one farthest from them, like a second-class guest. No one helped me, No one asked if I was comfortable. A uniformed server brought elaborate menus printed on heavy cardstock. I opened mine and pretended to not understand. Catherine watched me. She asked, "Do you need assistance with the menu?" with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Yes, please," I said quietly. "I don't recognize most of these dishes." She sighed audibly. "I'll order something appropriate for you. Something modest. We don't want to be wasteful." The comment hung in the air like poison. Gregory nodded approvingly. Rebecca started her plate. Daniel adjusted his tie. No one said anything, and I just watched. Catherine began the conversation by discussing their journey. The flight from the East Coast was exhausting, though of course we flew private. Commercial is simply unbearable these days.
She glanced at me, expecting a reaction. I just nodded. That sounds nice. We're staying at the Regency, she continued. The presidential suite, naturally. $2,000 per night, but one simply cannot compromise on comfort. Have you stayed at the Regency, Mrs. Patterson? No, I replied. I don't travel much. Ah, Catherine said with false sympathy. Of course. Not everyone has the opportunity. The food arrived. Enormous white plates with tiny, artfully arranged portions. Catherine cut into her duck confit with surgical precision. "This is $95, she announced, "but quality deserves investment. One cannot simply eat anywhere, can one?" I nodded meekly. "You're absolutely right." Gregory spoke for the first time. "Mrs. Patterson, Rebecca tells us you work in an office?" "Yes," I replied. "I do administrative work, filing, answering phones, basic tasks." Catherine and Gregory exchanged a meaningful look. "Administrative support," Catherine said slowly, as if tasting the words. "That's honorable work. All jobs have dignity, don't they?" "Yes," I agreed quietly. "All jobs have dignity." The meal continued with Catherine dominating the conversation. She talked about their properties, homes in 3 states, a villa in Europe, investment properties generating passive income. She talked about their country club memberships, their yacht, their art collection, their charitable foundation. Every statement was designed to establish superiority, to remind everyone at the table of their elevated status. And with each comment, she would glance at me, measuring my reaction, expecting me to be impressed, diminished, put in my place. "Rebecca tells us you live alone," Catherine said, her voice dripping with pity. "Yes," I replied, "I have a small house." "It must be difficult," she continued, "living on a limited income at your age. Do you manage to cover all your expenses?" I felt the trap closing. "I manage," I said softly. "I'm very careful with money." Catherine sighed dramatically. "You are very brave, Mrs. Patterson, truly. I admire women who struggle alone, though of course one always wishes parents could provide more for their children. But we all do what we can with what we have." There was the blow. Subtle, but deadly. She was telling me I had failed Rebecca, that I hadn't given her enough, that I was an inadequate mother. Rebecca was staring at her untouched food, Daniel was clenching his jaw, and I simply smiled. "Yes," I said, "we all do what we can." Catherine continued. "Gregory and I always ensured Daniel had the best, the finest schools, world travel, cultural experiences. He learned 3 languages by age 12. Now he has his position at the firm, earning quite well for his age." She paused. "We also helped the young couple significantly when they married. We gave them $75,000 for their home down payment. We believe in supporting family." She looked directly at me. "Were you able to contribute anything when they married?" The question hung like a blade. "Not much," I replied. "I gave them what I could, a small gift." Catherine smiled coldly. "Every gesture counts, regardless of amount. It's the thought that matters. I felt the rage begin to build inside me. Not hot, explosive rage, cold, controlled fury, like ice over deep water. I breathed slowly, maintained my timid smile, and let Catherine keep talking, because that's what people like her do. They talk, they boast, they reveal themselves. The more they talk, the more they expose the emptiness inside. Catherine lifted her wine glass. This is from our private collection, a 1998 Bordeaux. It costs $400 per bottle. Do you enjoy wine, Mrs. Patterson? Only occasionally, I replied, usually the inexpensive kind. Of course, Catherine said with condescension. Appreciating fine wine requires education, exposure, refinement. Gregory and I have visited vineyards in France, Italy, California, Argentina. We are quite knowledgeable. Gregory nodded. It's a passion, something we've passed to Daniel. The server brought dessert. Small, elaborately plated portions that looked like art installations. This dessert costs $45, Catherine announced. It has edible gold leaf. See those golden flakes? Only the finest establishments offer such details. I ate my simpler dessert in silence. Catherine set down her fork and looked at me with an expression of exaggerated concern. Mrs. Patterson, I think we should discuss something important as a family. Rebecca tensed visibly. Mother Catherine, I don't think... Catherine raised her hand. This is important, dear. She turned to me. Mrs. Patterson, I understand you did your best raising Rebecca alone. I'm sure it wasn't easy, and I respect that. But now Rebecca is at a different life stage. She's married into our family. She has responsibilities, expectations. I understand, I said quietly. I'm glad, Catherine continued, because Gregory and I have been discussing something. We believe it's important that Daniel and Rebecca have the freedom to build their life without unnecessary burdens. The word hung in the air. Burdens. She was calling me a burden. Daniel looked uncomfortable. Rebecca looked like she wanted to disappear. Gregory nodded approvingly. What are you suggesting? I asked, keeping my voice small.
Catherine leaned forward. We're suggesting that perhaps Rebecca doesn't need to worry so much about you. We know she feels obligated to check on you, to help you, to ensure you're managing. That's admirable, but it creates stress for her. I see, I replied. So Gregory and I had a thought, Catherine said. What if we provided you with a small monthly stipend? Nothing extravagant, perhaps $800, enough to help you live more comfortably without Rebecca feeling she must constantly worry about you. She paused, letting that sink in, and in return, we would simply ask that you give the young couple space. Don't call too frequently, don't expect regular visits, let them build their life freely. There it was. The offer. The bribe disguised as generosity. They wanted to pay me to disappear from my daughter's life, to eliminate the embarrassing poor mother who didn't fit their image. Rebecca's face went pale. Mother Catherine, you can't. Catherine interrupted. We're having an adult conversation, dear. Daniel spoke up. This isn't appropriate. It's perfectly appropriate, Gregory said firmly. We're solving a problem. I folded my napkin calmly. I took a sip of water. I let the silence grow heavy. Everyone was staring at me. Catherine with expectation, Gregory with arrogance, Rebecca with horror, Daniel with discomfort. Then I spoke. My voice came out different, no longer timid, no longer small. It was clear, firm, cold. That's a very interesting proposal, Catherine. Quite generous. Catherine smiled victoriously. I'm glad you see it reasonably. I nodded slowly. But I have some questions, just to understand clearly. Catherine blinked. Of course, ask whatever you like. I leaned forward slightly. You said $800 per month. Is that what you consider appropriate compensation for a mother to disappear from her daughter's life? Catherine's smile faltered. I wouldn't phrase it that way. How would you phrase it? I asked.
We're offering support, she said stiffly. Support, I repeated. How much did you say you gave for the house down payment? $75,000, Gregory answered proudly. And you mentioned other help. What was the total? Catherine hesitated. Perhaps $100,000 over the years. $100,000, I said thoughtfully. That's significant. And that bought you what, exactly? Catherine frowned. I'm not sure I understand. Did it buy you Rebecca's love, or just her compliance? The atmosphere shifted. Catherine stopped smiling. Excuse me? My tone sharpened. You've spent this entire evening discussing money, how much things cost, how much you've spent, how much you have, but you haven't asked me a single personal question. You haven't asked if I'm healthy, if I'm happy, if I'm lonely. You've only calculated my worth. And apparently, I'm worth $800 per month? Catherine paled. I didn't mean, yes, you did. From the moment I arrived, you've been measuring my value with your checkbook. And you know what I discovered, Catherine? People who only talk about money are the ones who understand its true value the least. Gregory intervened. I think you're misinterpreting my wife's intentions. I looked at him directly. What are her intentions? To treat me with pity? To humiliate me through dinner? To offer me charity in exchange for vanishing? Gregory opened his mouth but said nothing. Rebecca was shaking. Mom, please. No, Rebecca, I said firmly. I'm done being quiet. I sat back in my chair. There was no more timidity in my posture, no more shrinking. I looked Catherine directly in the eyes. She held my gaze for 1 second before looking away, uncomfortable. Something had changed, and everyone felt it. Catherine, you said something interesting earlier. You said you admire women who struggle alone. Catherine nodded uncertainly. Yes. Let me ask you something. Have you ever struggled alone? Have you ever worked without your husband's support? Have you ever built anything with your own hands? Catherine straightened. I have my own accomplishments. Such as what? I asked with genuine curiosity. I manage our investments. I oversee our properties. I chair our foundation. Properties you bought together, investments made with money he generated, a foundation funded by his wealth. Am I wrong? Gregory looked annoyed. My wife works as hard as I do. I don't doubt she works, I replied calmly. But there's a difference between managing existing wealth and creating it from nothing, between overseeing an empire you inherited and building it brick by brick. Catherine pressed her lips together. I don't see where you're going with this. Let me explain, I said. 35 years ago, I was 24 years old. I was a file clerk at a small company. I earned minimum wage. I lived in a studio apartment with secondhand furniture. I ate rice and beans most nights. And I was alone, completely alone. Rebecca stared at me. I had never told her this story in such detail. I continued. I got pregnant. The father left. My family disowned me. I had to decide whether to keep going or give up. I chose to keep going. I worked until my water broke. I went back to work 3 weeks after Rebecca was born. A neighbor watched her during the day. I paused to drink water. No one spoke. And do you know what happened, Catherine? I climbed. From clerk to assistant. From assistant to analyst. From analyst to manager. From manager to director. From director to VP. From VP to CEO. It took me 25 years. 25 years of relentless work, of sacrifices you cannot imagine. But I did it. Catherine was staring at the table. And do you know how much I earn now? Catherine shook her head slowly. $50,000 per month. The silence was absolute, as if someone had sucked all the air from the room. Rebecca dropped her fork with a clatter. Daniel's eyes went wide. Gregory's face showed disbelief. And Catherine froze, her mouth slightly open. $50,000, I repeated. Every month, for 15 years, that's $9 million in gross income, not counting bonuses, not counting stock options, not counting investments. Catherine blinked rapidly. That's not possible. You're lying. I'm the CEO of Stratton Global Consulting, I said calmly. We have offices in 12 countries. I manage 3,000 employees. I negotiate contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And I do it every single day. Rebecca was pale. Mom, why did you never tell me? I looked at her with love. Because you didn't need to know, sweetheart. Because I wanted you to grow up valuing character, not money. Because I wanted you to become a person, not an heiress. Because wealth corrupts, and I refuse to let it corrupt you. But then, Daniel whispered, why do you live in that small house? Why do you dress so simply? Why do you take the bus? I smiled. Because I don't need to impress anyone. Because real wealth is quiet. Because I learned that the more you have, the less you need to prove it. I looked at Catherine. That's why I dressed this way tonight. That's why I pretended to be poor. I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I had nothing. I wanted to see your real character. Catherine was red with shame and rage. This is absurd. If you had that kind of money, we would know. Daniel would know. Why would he? I asked. I don't discuss my career. I live modestly. The money I earn, I save and invest. I don't waste it on flashy jewelry or showing off at expensive restaurants. Gregory cleared his throat. This doesn't change the fact that you deceived us. Really? I looked at him coldly. You deceived me when you called me a burden? When you offered $800 to make me disappear? When you spent dinner insulting my clothes, my work, my life? Gregory had no response. Rebecca was shaking. Mom, please. No, Rebecca, I said firmly. I'm done being quiet. I stood up. Everyone looked at me. Let me tell you something nobody has evidently told you. Money doesn't buy class. It doesn't buy real education. It doesn't buy empathy. You have money, perhaps a lot of it, but you don't have an ounce of what truly matters. Catherine stood up, furious. And you do? You who lied to us? Who made us look like fools? I didn't make you look like fools, I replied coldly. You did that yourselves. I simply gave you the opportunity to show who you really are. And you did it magnificently. Rebecca had tears streaming down her face. Mom, I didn't know, swear I didn't know, that they would. I know, I interrupted gently. You didn't know, but they knew exactly what they were doing. They enjoyed belittling me until they discovered the poor woman they scorned has more than they do. Catherine trembled with rage. You have no right. I have every right, I replied. I'm your son's mother-in-law. I deserve respect. Not because of my money, not because of my title, but because I'm a human being. Something you forgot throughout this entire dinner. Daniel stood up. Mrs. Patterson, please. I'm not finished, I said firmly. I looked at Catherine one last time. You offered to help me with $800 per month. Let me make you a counter offer. I'll give you $2 million right now if you can prove you ever treated someone kindly who didn't have money. Catherine opened her mouth, closed it, said nothing. Exactly, I replied. You can't. Because to you, people are only worth their net worth. And that's the difference between us. I built wealth. You inherited it. I earned respect. You buy it. I have dignity. You have bank accounts.
I picked up my frayed cloth bag. I pulled out a black American Express Centurion card and dropped it on the table in front of Catherine. This is my personal card. Unlimited limit. Pay for this dinner. Consider it a gift from a struggling mother. Catherine stared at the card like it was a snake. Black, heavy, with my name engraved. Dr. Patricia Patterson, CEO. Her hand trembled as she picked it up. She turned it over, studied it, then looked at me. The superior gleam in her eyes was gone. Now there was something else. Fear. I don't need your money, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't need your pity either, I replied, yet you offered it all evening. So take it as a gesture of courtesy, something you clearly never learned despite all your country club memberships. Gregory hit the table lightly. Enough. You're being disrespectful. Respect? I repeated. Interesting you use that word now. Where was your respect when your wife asked if my salary was enough to survive? When she suggested I was a burden to my daughter? When she offered to buy me off? Gregory clenched his jaw. I looked at Rebecca. She was crying silently. Rebecca,
I said softly. She looked up, devastated. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know that my in-laws. Don't finish that sentence, I interrupted, because you did know. Maybe not about my money, but you knew how they are. You've seen how they treat service workers, how they talk about those people, and you said nothing. Rebecca sobbed. They're Daniel's parents. I didn't want to cause problems. I understand, I replied, but Daniel is also my son-in-law, and you're my daughter. And I let you make your choices because that's what love is. Freedom, not control, not manipulation through money. Gregory approached me. Mrs. Patterson, I apologize. I had no idea they would behave this way. I'm horrified. I looked at him. Are you? Or are you just horrified they got caught? He had no answer. Catherine was still standing, rigid, watching the scene with confusion and contained rage. This changes nothing, she finally said. You lied. You deceived us. You came here in bad faith. That's true, I nodded. I pretended to be something I'm not, exactly what you do every day. What does that mean? Gregory demanded. It means you hide behind your money, behind your mansions and cars and jewelry, behind everything you can buy. But inside, you're hollow. You have nothing real to offer except a bank balance. Catherine gave a harsh, bitter laugh. Coming from someone who lied all night, that's hypocritical. Perhaps, but my lie exposed your truth, and now you can't hide from it. The server approached nervously. Excuse me, is everything all right? Would anyone like coffee? Just the check, Gregory said sharply. The server nodded and disappeared. Catherine sat back down, deflated. Her posture was no longer regal. It was the posture of someone who had lost something important. Power. Mrs. Patterson, she said in a softer voice, I don't want this to ruin our family connection. Daniel and Rebecca love each other. We can't let this... Let this what? I interrupted. Let this expose what you really think? Too late, Catherine. We can start over, she insisted. Forget this evening. No, I said firmly, we can't. Because now I know who you are, and you know who I am. That truth cannot be erased. Gregory pulled out his wallet and extracted several credit cards. He selected one and placed it on the check tray. The server took it and left. We sat in heavy silence. Rebecca cried quietly. Daniel held her hand. Catherine stared at the wall. Gregory checked his phone to avoid eye contact. The server returned. Sir, this card was declined. Gregory looked up sharply. Declined? That's impossible. Try again. The server tried, returned. Also declined, sir. Gregory stood up, red-faced. This is absurd. I'm calling the bank. He stormed out. Catherine sat humiliated. This has never happened to us. How unfortunate, I said without emotion. Daniel reached for his wallet. No, I said firmly. You're not paying. I took out my wallet, simple, worn leather. I pulled out another card. This one was transparent, made of heavy metal. A card less than 1% of people in the world possess. I placed it on the table. Catherine looked at it. Her eyes widened. She recognized what it was. That's a J.P. Morgan Reserve card. Correct. Invitation only. $595 annual fee just to own it. Benefits you can't imagine. The server took the card carefully, as if it were sacred. He returned in less than 3 minutes. Thank you, Dr. Patterson. Everything is settled. Keep the receipt, I said. He nodded and left. Catherine stared at where the card had been. I stood up, took my old bag, and looked at Catherine one last time. Thank you for the evening, Catherine. Thank you for showing me exactly who you are. You saved me years of wondering. Catherine finally looked up. Her eyes were red with contained rage. This isn't over. Oh, it is, I smiled. You'll see me at holidays, at family gatherings, but now I'll see you differently. And you'll remember this night. Every time you see me, you'll remember. Gregory returned, his face ashen. There's been a security freeze on our accounts. It'll be resolved tomorrow. He looked at the table. Did someone pay? Yes, Catherine said quietly. She paid. Gregory looked at me. His pride was shattered. Thank you, he murmured, barely audibly. You're welcome, I replied. That's what family does, isn't it? Helps each other, especially when someone needs a small stipend. In this case, $1,200, which is what dinner cost. Gregory closed his eyes. I turned to Rebecca. Sweetheart, walk me out. She stood on shaky legs. We walked to the entrance together. Outside, under the porch light, she broke down. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know you. I never knew you had... Shh, I said, pulling her into a hug. It's not about the money. It's about respect. It's about how we treat people. I should have defended you, she sobbed. I should have said something when they started talking down to you. Yes, I agreed. You should have. But you were afraid, and I understand that. But Rebecca, you need to decide who you want to be. Do you want to be someone who stays silent while people you love are mistreated? She shook her head violently. No, I don't want. Then don't be, I said simply. Stand up. Speak up, even when it's uncomfortable. Will you forgive me? She asked. There's nothing to forgive, but there is something to learn. Learn that appearances don't matter. Learn that money doesn't define worth. Learn that kindness costs nothing. She hugged me tighter. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart, always. I pulled back and wiped her tears. Now go back inside. Talk to Daniel. Set boundaries with his parents. This cannot happen again. She nodded. It won't, I promise. I walked down the driveway toward the gate. The cool night air felt liberating. I had spoken my truth, I had defended my dignity, and I felt no regret. Rebecca called after me. Mom, how will you get home? I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. I ordered a car. A black Mercedes pulled up seconds later. The driver opened the door for me. Rebecca's mouth fell open. I smiled at her. Good night, sweetheart. The driver pulled away. Through the window, I watched Rebecca standing in the driveway, processing everything, beginning to understand. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Rough evening, ma'am? Something like that, I replied. Well, you're heading home now. That's what matters. Yes, I agreed. Home. We drove through the quiet streets. I looked out at the mansions, the luxury cars, the manicured perfection, and I felt sorry for people like Catherine and Gregory. They had so much and enjoyed so little. They measured everything by numbers on a balance sheet. They've forgotten how to connect with people as human beings. We arrived at my modest neighborhood. Small houses, older cars, real people living real lives. The driver looked uncertain. Are you sure this is correct, ma'am? Positive, I said. He opened my door. Have a good evening. You too. I walked up my cracked driveway to my small house, peeling paint, dated siding, a house that looked like it belonged to someone struggling. Inside, I took off the thrift store dress and worn shoes. I put on comfortable pajamas. I made tea. I sat on my old sofa in my living room filled with secondhand furniture, and I smiled. Because this was enough. This was everything. An honest life, a clear conscience, dignity. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. Mom, Daniel and I just told their parents we won't tolerate disrespect towards you. They're upset, but I don't care anymore. I'm proud to be your daughter. I replied, I'm proud to be your mother. Always have been.
Another text came, this one from an unknown number. I opened it. Mrs. Patterson, this is Catherine. I owe you an apology. What happened tonight was unacceptable. I don't expect forgiveness, but I am truly sorry. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, apologies are easy. Change is hard. Show me change and we'll talk. I put the phone down. The next morning, I woke early as always. Decades of discipline don't disappear overnight.
I made strong coffee, sat by my kitchen window, and watched the sun rise over my quiet neighborhood. My phone had been silent all night, which meant Rebecca and Daniel were probably still processing, still talking, still figuring out how to move forward. Around 9 a.m., my phone rang. It was Rebecca. "Mom, can I come over? I need to talk to you." "Of course, sweetheart. Come anytime." She arrived 30 minutes later. No makeup, hair in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt. She looked younger, more like the daughter I remembered before she married into wealth. We sat in my small kitchen with coffee between us. "Mom," she began, her voice shaky, "I've been up all night thinking about everything. About what happened at dinner, about how I've been living, about who I've become." I listened without interrupting. "When I married Daniel, I thought I was marrying him, but I realize now I married his family, his status, his money. And slowly, I started seeing the world the way they do. I started judging people by their clothes, their jobs, their addresses." She wiped away tears. "I became someone I don't even recognize, someone who was embarrassed by her own mother. Mom, how did I become that person?" "You became that person," I said gently, "because you wanted to fit in, because you wanted to be accepted, because you thought their approval mattered more than your values." "But it doesn't," she said firmly. "Their approval means nothing if I have to lose myself to get it." "What did Daniel say?" I asked. Rebecca took a deep breath. "Daniel was incredible. After you left, we went into another room and had the most honest conversation we've had in years. He said he's been feeling the same way, like we've been performing for his parents instead of living our own lives. He said he's tired of it." "And his parents?" "We went back to the dining room and told them together. We said we love them, but we won't accept how they treat people. We said if they want to be part of our lives, they need to treat everyone with respect regardless of their income or status." "How did they react?" She laughed bitterly. "Catherine started crying, saying we were ungrateful, that they'd given us everything. Gregory said we were being manipulated by you, that you'd poisoned us against them. They said if we didn't apologize, they'd cut us off financially." "And what did you say?" "Daniel said we'd rather be cut off than lose our integrity. I said we'd rather struggle than compromise our values." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you, Rebecca. That took courage." "It felt good, Mom. Scary, but good. Like I finally stood up for something that mattered." She paused. "But I also need to apologize to you. Really apologize. Not just for last night, but for years of taking you for granted. Of assuming you were just getting by, of never asking about your life, your work, your dreams." "Rebecca—" "No, please let me finish," she insisted. "I never asked because I didn't want to know. Because somewhere deep down, I was ashamed. Ashamed that my mother wasn't wealthy, wasn't impressive, wasn't someone I could brag about to Daniel's family." Her voice broke. "But you were always impressive. You raised me alone. You worked hard. You gave me everything I needed. And I repaid you by being embarrassed of you." I stood up and pulled her into a hug. "You were young. You were influenced. You made mistakes. But you're learning. That's what matters." We held each other for a long moment. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you keep your success a secret? Why didn't you ever tell me?" I sat back down. "Because I wanted you to build your own life. I wanted you to work, to struggle a little, to appreciate what you earned. I was afraid that if you knew I had money, you'd never push yourself. You'd never discover your own strength." "But I could have helped you," she said. "All these years I thought you were struggling. I worried about you." "That's not a bad thing," I replied. "Worrying about someone you love, wanting to help them, that shows character. If I told you I was wealthy, would you have worried about me? Would you have called to check on me? Or would you have just assumed I was fine?" Rebecca thought about this. "You're right. I probably wouldn't have called as much." "Exactly. Our relationship was built on genuine concern, not on money. And that's precious." "But now what?" Rebecca asked. "Now that I know, does everything change?" "Only if you let it," I said. "The money doesn't change who I am. It doesn't change who you are. It's just information." Can I tell you something? Rebecca said quietly. Of course. Part of me's relieved that you're not struggling, relieved that you're secure, but another part of me is angry. Angry? Yes, angry that you let me worry. Angry that you watched me marry into that family knowing what they were like. Angry that you didn't warn me. I nodded. That's fair. You're allowed to feel that. Did you know? Did you know that Catherine and Gregory were like before last night? I suspected, I admitted. The few times I met them before, I saw signs. The way Catherine talked about their housekeeper. The way Gregory tipped at restaurants. Small things that revealed character. Then why didn't you say anything? Because you wouldn't have believed me, I replied honestly. If I told you they were classist and cruel, you would have thought I was jealous or trying to control you. You needed to see it yourself. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. You're right. I wouldn't have believed you. I would have defended them. People have to discover truth on their own. That's the only way it really sinks in. My doorbell rang. We looked at each other, surprised. I opened the door to find Daniel standing there, exhausted but determined. Mrs. Patterson, may I come in? Of course. He entered and saw Rebecca in the kitchen. I hoped you'd be here. He turned to me. Mrs. Patterson, I need to apologize, not just for last night, but for every time I stood by while my parents belittled people, for every time I laughed at their jokes about those people, for every time I let their values become my values. Daniel, Rebecca started. Please, let me finish, he said. I grew up in that environment. I thought it was normal. I thought having money meant you were better than people who didn't. But last night, watching you, Mrs. Patterson, seeing your dignity, your strength, your refusal to be diminished, I realized I've been wrong about everything. He sat down heavily. My parents taught me that money equals worth, but you showed me that character equals worth, and I've been living without character for too long. What are you going to do? I asked. I'm going to change, he said simply, starting now. I called my parents this morning and told them Rebecca and I are moving out of the house they bought us. Rebecca's eyes widened. You did? I did. I told them we're going to buy our own place, with our own money, on our own terms. I told them we don't want their financial support anymore. I told them we need to build our own life, separate from their control. How did they react? I asked. My father said I was throwing away my inheritance. My mother said I was being manipulated by you, that you'd poisoned us against them. They said if we didn't apologize, they'd cut us off financially. And what did you say? Daniel said we'd rather be cut off than lose our integrity. I said we'd rather struggle than compromise our values. I smiled. That sounds like a good plan. Mrs. Patterson, Daniel said, I know I have no right to ask this, but could you help us, not with money, but with advice? You built yourself from nothing. You know how to do this. Could you teach us? I'd be happy to, I replied, but first you need to answer a question. Anything. Why do you want to do this? Is it to punish your parents, to prove a point, or is it because you genuinely want to change? He thought carefully. A month ago, I would have said to prove a point, but now, after last night, after seeing the difference between someone with money and someone with character, I want to change. I want to be someone my future children can be proud of, not because I'm wealthy, but because I'm good. That's the right answer, I said. Over the next few weeks, I watched Rebecca and Daniel transform. They moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment, they sold the luxury car their Daniel's parents had given them, and bought a used sedan. They learned to budget, to meal plan, to find joy in simple things. And I taught them. I taught them about investing for the future, not just spending in the present. I taught them about building wealth through patience and discipline. I taught them about giving to others, not from excess, but from genuine desire to help. One evening, about a month after the dinner, Rebecca called me. Mom, Catherine wants to meet with you. Why? She wants to apologize, properly. She asked if you'd have lunch with her. I hesitated. What do you think?
I think she's genuinely trying, Rebecca said. She's been different lately, quieter, more thoughtful. I think that night really affected her. Where does she want to meet? She suggested that same expensive restaurant.
I smiled. Tell her I'll meet her at the diner on 5th Street, Tuesday at noon. Rebecca laughed. Really? Really. If she wants to apologize, she can do it in a normal place where normal people eat. I'll tell her. Tuesday arrived. I drove to the diner, a place I'd been going to for 20 years. Red vinyl booths, laminated menus, coffee in thick ceramic mugs. Real food at real prices. Catherine was already there, sitting in a corner booth. She wore simple black pants and a white blouse. No jewelry except small earrings. No designer handbag. She looked almost normal. I slid into the booth across from her. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "You asked to meet. I'm here." A waitress came over. "What can I get you, ladies?" "Coffee and the tuna melt," I said. Catherine looked at the menu, uncertain. I'll have the same." The waitress left. Catherine folded her hands on the table. "I don't know how to start this." "Start with why you're here," I suggested. "I'm here because I can't stop thinking about that night, about how I treated you, about what you said, about who I saw in the mirror afterward." "And who did you see?" "Someone I don't like very much," she admitted. "Someone cruel, someone shallow, someone who had forgotten that wealth is a privilege, not a right." I sipped my water, waiting. "I grew up poor, Mrs. Patterson. Desperately poor. My parents were immigrants who worked 3 jobs each just to keep us fed. I wore secondhand clothes until I was 18. I never had anything new, anything nice, anything that made me feel valuable." She looked out the window. "When I married Gregory, when his business took off, when we finally had money, I told myself I'd never be poor again. I'd never feel less than anyone again. But somewhere along the way, I stopped protecting myself from poverty and started using wealth as a weapon. I started measuring everyone by what they had because it made me feel superior. It made me feel safe. But you're not safe. You're trapped. Trapped by your own fear." Catherine looked at me, tears in her eyes. "You're right. I'm terrified every day. Terrified of losing it all. Terrified of going back to being that poor girl. Terrified that without money, I'm nothing." "That's the difference between us," I said. "I know I'm someone with or without money. My worth doesn't come from my bank account. It comes from my character, my work, my relationships. You never learned that." "No, I agree, I didn't." The food arrived. We ate in silence for a few minutes. Finally, Catherine spoke again. "I want to apologize. Truly, deeply apologize. Not just for that dinner, but for years of treating people poorly. Service workers, store clerks, anyone I deemed beneath me. I'm ashamed of who I've been." "Apologies are meaningless without change. Are you willing to change?" "I want to, but I don't know how. This is who I've been for so long." "Then start small," I suggested. "Start by tipping generously and sincerely thanking people who serve you. Start by having conversations with people without asking what they do for work. Start by measuring people by their kindness, not their income." Catherine nodded, taking mental notes. "And most importantly," I continued, "stop using money to control people. Stop using it to buy love, to buy respect, to buy compliance. Let people love you for who you are, not what you can give them." "What if they don't?" she asked quietly. "What if without the money, no one wants to be around me?" "Then you learn who your real friends are, and you build new relationships based on authenticity." We finished our meal. Catherine paid, leaving a generous tip that made the waitress's eyes widen. As we stood to leave, Catherine said, "May I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why did you agree to meet me today? After how I treated you, you could have refused. Why give me this chance?" I thought about it. Because everyone deserves a chance to change. because holding grudges only hurts the person holding them, and because I saw something in you that night, underneath all the cruelty. I saw fear. And I understand fear. Thank you, Catherine said, her voice breaking. Thank you for seeing me as human, even when I didn't see you that way. We walked out of the diner together. On the sidewalk, Catherine hesitated. Mrs. Patterson, I know I have no right to ask this, but could we perhaps have coffee again sometime? Not to apologize more, but to talk, to learn. I'd like to understand how you became who you are. I'd like that. Call me next week. She smiled, genuine for the first time. I will. I watched her walk to her car, an ordinary sedan, not the luxury vehicle she'd driven before. Small changes, but changes nonetheless. Over the next several months, Catherine and I met regularly. At first, she was stiff, formal, clearly uncomfortable in casual settings, but gradually she relaxed. She started asking real questions. She started listening instead of waiting to talk about herself. One afternoon, about 4 months after the infamous dinner, I met Rebecca and Catherine for coffee. Rebecca had suggested it, wanting to rebuild some kind of relationship with her mother-in-law. Catherine arrived early, got there before both of us, and had already ordered and paid for our drinks. I remembered your orders, she said shyly. When we arrived, we sat outside at a small table. The conversation flowed easily, naturally. Catherine asked about Rebecca's work, actually listened to the answers, asked follow-up questions that showed genuine interest. At one point, Rebecca excused herself to take a phone call. Catherine turned to me. I need to tell you something. What is it? We're restructuring our finances. We're putting most of our wealth into a charitable trust. We're keeping enough to live comfortably, but we're giving the rest away. I was surprised. That's a significant decision. It's necessary, she said. I realized I was letting money poison everything in my life. My marriage, my relationships with my children, my self-worth. I needed to let it go. How does Gregory feel about this? He fought me at first, but then he started seeing what I was seeing, that we were becoming people we didn't like, that our grandchildren, when we have them, would grow up as entitled and cruel as we were. He didn't want that. What will the trust fund? Scholarships for first-generation college students, housing assistance for working families, small business loans for people without access to traditional banks. We want to give people the opportunities we had, the opportunities that changed our lives. That's beautiful, Catherine. I'm doing it because of you, she said, because you showed me that real wealth is using what you have to lift others up, not to separate yourself from them. Rebecca returned. What did I miss? Your mother-in-law just told me about some very exciting plans. Catherine explained the trust to Rebecca, who listened with growing amazement. Mom, Catherine, that's incredible. Does Daniel know? Not yet. I wanted to tell you both together. I'm hoping Daniel might want to be involved to help manage the trust. He has a good heart underneath the privilege, but he just needs a purpose. He'd love that, Rebecca said. He's been looking for meaningful work, something that matters beyond making money. 6 months after the dinner that changed everything, Rebecca called me early one Saturday morning. Mom, can you come over? There's something Daniel and I want to show you. I drove to their apartment. When they opened the door, they were both beaming. What's going on? I asked. Rebecca held out her hand. On her finger was a simple, modest ring. We renewed our vows, just the two of us, at the courthouse yesterday. No expensive ceremony, no designer dress, no catering, just us and our promises to each other. Daniel put his arm around her. We wanted to start fresh, to commit to each other based on who we really are, not who we were pretending to be. And we want to show you something else, Rebecca said, leading me to their small dining table. On it were blueprints and documents. We're starting a business, Daniel explained, a financial literacy nonprofit. We're going to teach people especially young people from low-income backgrounds, how to manage money, how to invest, how to build wealth slowly and sustainably. We're using our own savings to start it, Rebecca added, and Catherine and Gregory have offered to fund it through their trust once we're established. I looked at the plans, at their excited faces, at the transformation that had occurred. "I'm so proud of you both," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "We couldn't have done this without you, Mom," Rebecca said. "Without your example, without your willingness to show us the truth, even when it hurt."
Daniel nodded. "You taught us that money is just a tool. What matters is what you build with it, who you help with it, how you use it to make the world better." We spent the afternoon discussing their plans. They had thought of everything, researched everything, planned carefully and realistically. As I was leaving, Rebecca walked me to my car. "Mom, there's one more thing." "What is it?" "I want you to know I understand now why you kept your success quiet, why you let me think you were struggling. You were teaching me something I couldn't learn any other way." "What's that?" "That love isn't about money, that family isn't about financial support, that the strongest bonds are built on caring for each other as people, not as providers or dependents." I hugged her tightly. "You learned it well." "I had a good teacher," she whispered. 1 year after the dinner, I received an invitation in the mail. It was to a gala fundraiser for Daniel and Rebecca's nonprofit, which had grown faster than anyone expected. The event was at a modest hotel ballroom, nothing extravagant. I arrived wearing a simple black dress, nothing designer, nothing flashy. The room was full of people from all walks of life. Wealthy donors, yes, but also students who had benefited from the program, community leaders, teachers, and social workers. Rebecca spotted me and rushed over. "Mom, I'm so glad you're here." "I wouldn't miss it." She led me to a table at the front where Catherine and Gregory were already seated. They both stood to greet me. "Patricia," said Catherine warmly, hugging me. "Thank you for coming." Gregory shook my hand firmly. "Mrs. Patterson, it's good to see you." We sat together as Daniel took the stage to speak. He talked about the journey that led to this moment. He talked honestly about his privilege, his blind spots, his mistakes. And then he said something that made me tear up. "A year ago, I met someone who changed my life. She didn't do it by giving me advice or lecturing me. She did it by showing me through her own example what real strength looks like, what real wealth looks like, what real class looks like." He looked directly at me. "Patricia Patterson taught me that money without character is worthless, that privilege without purpose is poison, that you can have everything and be nothing, or have nothing and be everything." The room applauded. Catherine reached over and squeezed my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not giving up on us." After the speeches, after the dinner, after the donations were collected, I found myself on the balcony overlooking the city. The lights twinkled below, thousands of lives being lived, thousands of stories unfolding. Rebecca joined me. "You're quiet." "I'm just thinking," I replied. "About what?" "About how one dinner changed so many lives, how one night of honesty created ripples that are still spreading." Rebecca leaned her head on my shoulder. "I used to think you were just my mom, just a regular person doing regular work, but you're so much more than that." "I'm exactly what I always was. I just let you see all of me instead of hiding parts." "Why hide? Why not show people your success, your achievements?" "Because I didn't need external validation. I knew my worth. I didn't need anyone else to confirm it. And I wanted you to learn the same lesson, to know your worth regardless of what anyone else thinks, regardless of what you have or don't have." "I'm learning, slowly, but I'm learning." We stood in comfortable silence, watching the city. "Mom?" "Yes." "Thank you for pretending to be poor that night." I smiled. "Thank you for learning the lesson." As I drove home later that evening, I thought about the year that had passed, the confrontation that had hurt so many feelings but ultimately healed so many relationships, the truth that had been painful but necessary, the changes that had been difficult but transformative.
I pulled into my driveway, looked at my small, modest house, and felt complete contentment. This house, this life, this quiet existence was exactly enough. Not because I couldn't afford more, but because I didn't need more. Inside, I made tea and sat in my familiar chair. On my phone was a message from Catherine. Gregory and I are hosting a small dinner next month. Just family. Very casual. We'd love for you to come. No dress code, no pretense. Just us. I smiled and replied, I'd love to. Thank you for the invitation. Another message came through, this time from Daniel. Mrs. Patterson, thank you for coming tonight. Your presence meant everything. You're the grandmother I hope our future children will have, someone who teaches them values, not values. I replied, I'm honored, and I'm proud of the man you're becoming. As I prepared for bed, I looked at myself in the mirror. Same gray hair, same lines on my face, same simple pajamas. But something was different in my eyes. There was peace there, deep, unshakable peace. I had spent years building wealth in silence. I had spent years letting people underestimate me. I had spent years being invisible by choice. But that one night, when I let the mask drop, when I stopped pretending to be poor and revealed who I really was, I discovered something important. The money didn't define me. The title didn't define me. The success didn't define me. What defined me was my willingness to stand up for my dignity, my refusal to be diminished, my insistence on being treated with respect regardless of appearance. And that lesson, that truth, had spread to my daughter, to my son-in-law, to his parents, to everyone who witnessed that night. I climbed into bed, pulled up the worn but comfortable blanket, and smiled at the ceiling. I had pretended to be poor to expose the truth about others, but what I actually did was reveal the truth about myself. That I didn't need money to be powerful. I didn't need designer clothes to command respect. I didn't need a mansion to feel at home. I just needed to be myself, fully and unapologetically. And that was the greatest wealth of all.
What did you think of this story? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And tell me, where in the world are you watching from? It always amazes me to see how far these stories reach. If this story touched your heart or taught you something valuable, you can help me continue creating more content like this by sending a super thanks. Your support means everything to me and allows me to keep sharing these life lessons with you. I can't wait to read your comments and hear how this story resonated with you. Right now on your screen, you'll see 2 more compelling life stories that I think you'll really enjoy. My channel is filled with stories just like this one. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a new story. I'll see you very soon in the next one. Sending you love and respect.